evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Corderio. I'm from an organization. I'm wearing two hats tonight. So I'm from an organization called Learn Free, which is an education advocacy organization, strategic consultancy on education as well. And we have a very kind of simple kind of motto, in the sense that we want to make learning available to everyone, anywhere, at the lowest possible cost. And you can look at cost in many different ways, in terms of time and in terms of, but in terms of money as well. And so that's kind of one of the hats that I'm wearing. And I think when I'm speaking from a policy perspective, that will be who I am. But I'm also here on behalf of the Pezelozzi Trust, which is one of the organizations that we consult to. Learn Free is a very small boutique organization. I think in marketing they call it a boutique organization. In reality, like niche is also boutique and niche. What that means is like very small.
Very special.
Really overloaded, like a handful of overloaded people. That's what it really means. That's what a boutique looks like. But I'm also here on behalf of the Pezelozzi Trust, which is one of the organizations that we consult to. I think people know the Pezelozzi Trust as a civil rights organization that has been fighting in the education space for the rights for civil education rights and for the rights of parents and families to home educate their children for well over 20 years. And I'm actually going, and when I speak in my speech, I think I'll also explain why that is actually so important and has allowed the Trust to do what it has done with particularly the BELA Bill. So that is just, but on behalf of the Trust, let me say I'm most probably here to answer your questions. More than make any kind of policy statement. Let me also just thank you all for being here. Thanks to Vaughan and thanks to Livingston House. I found out this afternoon that at my hotel, which is very trendy, they're having something about creatives, something about, I think the part that's concerning me is hip hop. And that's happening in the floor under where I'm staying. So I don't know about the others here, but you can ask questions until quite late, until at least the hip hop people have gone. Thanks very much, Vaughan. I suppose what I wanted to say is that most of you maybe, or some of you maybe have seen that I was working on my speech just before we started speaking. And I'm very glad today that this evening that I've got Steve here, and that he's the chief whip of the ACDP. Because let me tell you, I've written this, I'm sick and tired of rewriting my speech. Okay? And the chief culprit here is this lady to my right. And every time I start my speech and I say, now that the BELA Bill, and you can, there's a whole lot of like options you can fill in. I've got a drop-down menu, has passed through the committee, is going through public, whatever. That's how I sort of start the speech, and I say, then we can now talk about, the other changes that we'd like to see, or what the real BELA Bill should be. Now, every time I start the speech, I do that. About 10 minutes before I speak, someone phones me and says, Maury says something new has happened on the BELA Bill. The BELA Bill is being held up in some way. Now, I'm getting quite sick of it. I'm appealing to Honourable Scott to crack the whip, to bring order, to bring Honourable Sukkers in line. I want us to stop this BELA Bill stuff. I want to move on. So what I want to do today is like they're doing like the American Senate. I want to yield a few of my minutes back to Honourable Sukkers because once again, she has ruined my speech. So Honourable Sukkers, please tell us before I go into the history of the BELA Bill, before I go into what the BELA Bill should be, and before I go into how we work politically, and I'll use a slightly broader definition of that word than party politically, how we all have to work to make the real BELA Bill that we need, I'm going to ask you to tell us, once again, how you've ruined my speech.
Yeah, so what Christopher is referring to, of course, is that I spoke about the process, and it was in the National Assembly, it's now in the National Council of Provinces, and they would have voted today on the BELA Bill, and we were all ready and armed for that. And this morning I put on Twitter, God will part the Red Sea. And I absolutely believe he will. The National Council of Provinces today did not vote on the bill. The bill was referred back to the committee, and the vote will take place, according to them, next week on the 16th of May. For technical reasons, they did not vote on the bill. And it is going to be very interesting to see how the next coming week is going to look like. And I think Steve, in this case, needs to give us some kind of an idea. What does this mean in terms
No pressure.
What does this mean in terms of timeline? So the NCOP did not vote on the bill. It was, the bill was it was taken off for voting for technical reasons. Now, yeah.
Don't clap. So let me, almost working backwards, what I want to talk about really is, well, I'll mention it backwards and I'll talk about it hopefully forwards, is that I'm going to end up by speaking about what we have to do politically to bring about change. And it's change not only in education, because I think the model is applicable to whatever area we're talking about. Then I'm going to say what the BELA Bill should be, what the real BELA Bill should be. And I'm going to start off with a bit of a history of the BELA Bill. Mm-hmm. So Honourable Sukkers has told us already, the BELA Bill is already 10 years old. And in that process, and one of the things that I want to really emphasize is that what we need is reform about how we make policy. Diesel has spoken about the white paper and how it's essentially just, it's on the white paper and let's just throw that white paper out and now. That was then, this is now. So this is what we really need fundamentally is policy reform. It's how do we bring it about. Now, the BELA Bill started 10 years ago, Honourable Sook has mentioned it. In those 10 years, it's become the omnibus jump on the bus bill. So it's become a bill that's got virtually everything in it. Sometimes I actually think that's what happened with the BELA Bill is that different government departments, someone had was taking a lunch order at the department, and they were going around and they were saying, so what you can have, what do you want in the bill? No, I'll have this in the bill. And then they go to the next, no, I'll have that in the bill, and I'll have that, but just take that off, and no, just sugar-free Coke only, please. So it's like they almost had this, it's like a shopping list. It really is, it's a shopping list bill. Yeah. Some people say Frankenstein bill, but it's a shopping list bill. It's got all these weird pieces in it that don't work together. And that's one of the fundamental problems of the bill. And literally, the longer it took, the more lunch orders got put onto the bill, right? And so that was really the fundamental flaw of the bill over the about, 8 years that it took to get to Parliament. I've heard some strange stories, Department of officials really quoting nonsense stories. The bill, actually, public comment was on the bill in 2017. And people made very, I think, incisive comments, and people were actually really asking the problem, work with us, fix this bill. There are important things that need to be changed in education. And this will be, there's a little bit of foreshadowing here, but I'll give you some sense of why politics is important, why political parties are important, even if they're not in the majority. Because this bill progressed through. It came, and to be quite frank, at that stage, some political parties obviously made submissions, but in general it was the public engaging with the DBE. And then what happened is the bill eventually, as Honourable Sook has said, got to Parliament. The ACDP has been very active. Starting in 2013, I should also mention ex-parliamentarian Sherilyn Dudley, who at that stage already spoke on 2013, was asking the minister, well, when are you going to actually, I hear this wonderful bill is coming, but when are you going to actually, maybe engage with the public about it, and particularly with the homeschoolers? In 2017, I think it was on the 28th of October or 28th of November, actually, and once again, I think Honourable Dudley at that stage made a very important point. She said to the committee, it's very prophetic, she said to the committee, are you going to listen to the public, or are you just going to run a process which will end up in the bill facing a legal challenge and being struck down. And then we have to go back to the drawing board, and Parliament will have to pay costs. That was when you had a Parliament building. You weren't paying for Parliament buildings at that stage to be rebuilt. So Parliament then had financial problems. But I really want to come to one of the key moments that's relevant to what you're saying today, and the value of having parliamentarians who know what's happening on a bill and fighting, even if it's one voice or two voices. And I can also say, and I'll come to this point when I talk about politics, is that one person can do a lot. Steve will know very well that once you understand your rules, 2 people can do more, and 3 people can do more. And each parliamentarian you add, it goes up exponentially, the impact you can have. And so one of the key factors and one of the key reasons we have this problem now was when this bill was put through, when the committee report was first written, 9,005, and this was a few months ago, I think September, Octoberish, 9,000 last year, 9,500 submissions were left out. The committee basically said, we have something, a statistically relevant sample or something, we don't need to count, we don't need to go through everyone's submissions. Honourable Sikkers was one of the people who fought that issue in the committee. The committee then had to go back and get those 9,500 submissions processed. The issue there is that took 3 weeks. 3 critical weeks, which I think Steve will speak to about what could possibly happen now because of that. But I can tell you that if those 3 weeks had come out of the process and we were 3 weeks more advanced in the process now, we wouldn't be in the situation today where it looks like a critical mistake has been made in the processing of the bill that's going to delay it further. So I want to just emphasize there that point about how critical having competent parliamentarians in the House who are going to carry your agenda. Then I think we know, I think Steve will speak a little bit more about where the bill is in danger now at the moment, but this billable process has been, quite frankly, a disaster. It's been a very poor process. It has, unfortunately, people have spoken multiple times and warned about why this process is flawed. As the process went into the NCOP, it was evident there that there have been significant problems with how the bill was processed. The warnings of the past coming back, and this desire just to push the bill through irrespective of what happens. It got so bad in one case in Gauteng, the public were told that children can't make a submission on the bill, and that's completely unconstitutional. So
mistake.
The reality is that, and I can say this because I'm a legal strategist, I'm not a lawyer, because if you ask a lawyer, they'll always tell you, I can't tell you anything about how your case is going to go. But I can tell you there's a very high chance a very significant chance that this bill will be struck down for procedural flaws. The very warning made in the House in 2017, in November, I sat there that day, or in the committee chamber, I sat there that day, is now 5 years later coming to fruition because the government did not listen. And I hope the ANC is listening. Hello, tick, 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 I won't bring it. I hope the ANC is listening, because this BELA Bill is like becoming like a haunted house. It's like one of these horror stories, okay? It's like that horror story where the friends go to the house for the first time on the first evening, right? And then something spooky happens, okay? And then they go, oh no, we mustn't go in the house. Good move. Second time, they go and try, and something even spooky happens, and then they run away. This is now like the third time, guys. Hello, ANC. This is like the third time, guys. I'm giving you a warning. This does not end well, okay? The one kid is gonna run away and come back and have to save you at the end. Don't go back into the haunted house. Let the bill die now, please. So let me say a little bit. So if this bill dies, which it should, and I'm saying do not go back into the haunted house, the issue is there are real challenges in the education system. Honourable Sukkers made with Honourable Matric from the ANC made a very clear point in the committee. Honourable Sukkers said she had to Engels to get her children into quality education in the Western Cape. There is a fundamental problem there. There is a fundamental problem in the ECD sector, the way that it's been treated. The committee agreed to actually put ECD into the bill. They said, I wouldn't say the committee said this as a whole, but certainly the implication of putting ECD into the bill was, we're going to have to wait a little bit, give it a year, maybe a year and a half, let's work ECD in so we have a holistic solution. It went into the bill and it just mysteriously disappeared out of the bill. So there are a number of fundamental challenges. And because this bill took 10 years, all sorts of things happened. COVID happened. We have seen the emergence, what we call the emerging educational modalities, new ways of conducting education. The fundamental reality is that we cannot, in South Africa, and this is what the BELA Bill should be addressing, or this is what a BELA Bill should be addressing, a true, not a schools bill, a true education bill should be addressing, is it should be saying, how do we get education, how do we get education into our country? And we cannot do it in the traditional way. We just don't have the money. And things are not going to get better, even fiscally. Even if fiscally things stay the same, we're going to get better. There are fundamental drivers that are not going to get better. One of those fundamental drivers is that over the next 10 years, 50%, 1 in every 2 of our teachers is going to retire. We already have 70 kids in a classroom. We already have 120 kids in a classroom. How are we going to do that unless we fundamentally change our education system now? It's already too late in a way. And that is the fundamental, and a lot of this nonsense and we're getting a lot of nonsense on the BELA Bill. People are not taking the simple facts that people are putting forward to them and saying, you know what, you've got a point. Let's just listen and let's just actually get that sorted out so that we can get to these fundamental issues that are critical. That is not happening, and this is a looming crisis. The crisis was hidden about a year ago. The crisis is emerging right now in the Western Cape, in Gauteng, in many places. We are seeing teachers are leaving the profession because they are retiring. And there's this kind of weird dream out there that somehow they'll just replace all those teachers. It's not, that's fundamental, it's not going to happen. So these are the things that we need to be addressing with the real BELA Bill, with a new bill, in fact not even a new bill, a new stable of legislation that looks at how we reform the South African education system. That's fundamental. Now, how do we get there? Because that's like a bit of a pipe dream, without having a process to get there. And this is particularly where I want to speak about politics, but politics within 2 senses. When I came in this evening, I made a bit of a joke. I said, given the ACDP people that I see all around me, I said, like they say on BBC, other brands are available. Because you have to sort of do that on a public broadcaster. Yes. But and then Honourable Sitka said, but not recommended. But that's an issue I'll leave to you. But the fundamental issue here is we need to start thinking and looking about politics we need to be very focused in the narrow sense of party political politics, but we also need to be looking about politics as an ongoing process in which we are all engaged. Why has the Pezelozzi Trust been able to conduct one of the most critical and successful fights against, the most critical and successful fight against a bill in the history of the democratic South Africa, and to be quite frank, in the history of South Africa as a whole? Perhaps maybe one of the only ones I can remember that ultimately failed was the coloured voters roll case back in the 50s. The reason is that an organisation, a public organisation, was established 25 years ago to work on that, to gather funds, to be able to fight for this battle 25 years into the
Very
future.
good.
That's what each and every one of us needs to be doing. We need to be creating new kinds of political, in the broader sense of the word, organizations that can work with political parties and say, how do we get the legislation that we want? How do we get the legislation that we need? And I think the issue is, and that starts with us developing political literacy and political knowledge. Now, Honourable Sukkers, I don't think I would be lying if I said, as a typical MP, when you came to Parliament, you knew very little about parliamentary process. Doesn't apply to Honourable Swart, because of course he almost built the house. So he knows where all the plumbing is and all the electricity.
I still had to learn that.
Yeah, but the point is, our government believes, or our government would like us to believe, that they can educate everything into you. That teenage hormones can be controlled through a little bit of education somehow, through some miracle. Everything can be taught. If you ever go and look at how many matric subjects there are, it's like this unending list. I mean, and I've got no disrespect, it's Tamil, it's Naidu, it's Tamil, it's Hindi, it's Mandarin, there is marine management, marine this. There's like 800 subjects. There's one subject that is not taught in the South African curriculum. One subject that seems almost unteachable. Civics. We don't teach people how politics works. We don't teach people how a bill gets passed. I think one of the great things that we can take out of the BELA Bill is that so many more people, and now we see it across these groups, we have people saying, ordinary members of the public, moms, dads, going, has the C version of the bill been put on the government? Is this the C or D version of the bill? So there's
It's amazing.
So it's amazing. There's been a huge growth in knowledge, self-learned knowledge. But that is something that we need to take on board. And then form organizations and then form alliances with political parties that will support what your organization is doing, wherever it is across the political spectrum. Our organization is a party political, not apolitical, a party political. And I can tell you, every party has a point. The EFF, people may hate it, but the EFF has a point, right? I don't think they've got the solution, but they do have a point. And we have to hear, that's the wonderful thing about South Africa, we have to hear that diversity, where we understand, this is my pain, this is my problem, this is what's happening in my community. And it's different for every community. But the reality of the situation, and as I say, I don't agree with all the solutions, but as organizations, as people working together, form organizations, follow the example that the Pezelozzi Trust has set for homeschoolers, and form an organization, start raising funds. Steve is, well, I'll say this because this is the upcoming years, and I can make a prediction. The upcoming 5 years is the years of the lawyers. It's going to be a very good time to be a lawyer, because what's happening at the moment is a whole lot of legislation is being rushed through. It's all going to be struck down.
Yes.
And it's all highly likely to be struck down, and we're going to go back to step one and we're going to start again. It is sad, it's a huge waste of money, but I think it's a good learning curve. And what we need to do is the fundamental thing we need to do to not have this happen again is policy reform. And we have to do something, and I'm not saying policy reform, I'm saying reform of how we actually make policy, and that we begin to involve the public. And the way to do that, and this is not rocket science, this is very simple. You can't solve downstream problems. It's very expensive to solve downstream problems downstream. The BELA Bill is now at the end of its life, and it's got so many problems because those problems were not addressed upstream. And what we need is we need a policy process that mimics a project management process, and a very simple process of identifying. One, what is the problem? Is this a real problem? Is gender identity in schools a real problem? Let's find that out. Then let's look at, and then Get the public involved at that stage, not where right at the end of the process you say, do you have any thoughts on this? We've thought everything through. So you start there. You say, identify the problem, develop alternative solutions. Let's honestly look at all the solutions on the table. And then after that, let's look at, and then we begin looking at implementation. Let's craft the legislation and write it in the right way, so that we're not doing what people are doing at the moment on the BELA Bill and have been doing. We're kind of, the lawyers are fixing it as the car is riding along, right? Let's not do that, and then let's pass that bill. And at each of those stages, and I'm going to use a very technical legal term, we need to make this process justiciable. We need to be able for people to say, in the problem identification process, when we were there at my village and they said you have to build a bridge, we said that's not the solution, we want boats, okay? And this is the reason we want boats. And we can't wait until that process comes to the end. We have to at that stage say, okay, now I'm going to court, guys, because we said boats, you say bridges, let's go to the third party. Now, and this is one of the fun, if you go into our constitutional law textbooks, you'll see our constitutional law textbooks talk about exactly this, public engagement, a meaningful public engagement. We have meaningful public engagement, we should, in Parliament, where public gets the opportunity to comment on the bills. That's legislative, because we have three branches of government, the legislative, the judicial. Now, even in the judicial, we have a degree of public engagement where lay assessors sit with the judges. And this is a very fundamental, and I think to some extent, Steve must probably correct me here, but a very fundamental and unique part of South African South African society, because of our history of the public being pushed away from governmental processes. But the textbooks all say we have not yet worked out how the executive, so the government, the presidency in a sense in one way, but the executive have public participation. And I argue that this reform of the policy-making process is one of the very, very critical reforms that we need, maybe not in the next 5 years. I don't think there'll maybe be people wanting to push that through, but possibly. It all depends how we vote on the 29th. But this is one of the critical issues that we need to reform, and it cuts across, whether it's BELA Bill, whether it's building bridges, whether it's anything. We need to get the public involved, and we need the public to be able to say, okay, thank you very much. When you form these organizations that are able to enforce the law, to say, no, you say bridges, we say boats, let the third party decide that.